Happy last day of winter. And we didn't know it at the time, but what a wonderful way to celebrate the last day of winter. We're delighted to have you all here today and to have a visit from the Tango X Trio. One of the trio's members, Alex Wu, who's playing piano, has been here many times because, as some of you know, he is part of the Zigzag Quartet, and he's been here as a soloist and with several other musicians. The other two are new, so we thank you for coming, and we thank the Friends of the Library for their sponsorship of all of our concerts. If you're not a member, particularly if you live outside of our district, and if you join for any amount, you will get our newsletter mailed to you, which is a great thing if you want to know what's going on. So, without further ado, please welcome the Tango X Trio.
That's good. Aren't we lucky? Well, happy almost spring, right? Tomorrow kind of marks spring. You wouldn't have thought it with all this Mother Nature saved last, the best for last, you might say, with the snow. Anyway, it's good to be back. Thank you all for coming out and making it out. This is a new group that I've had the privilege and honor of working with. Particularly this fellow over here, J.P. Ofre, who's becoming an emerging composer and bandoneon player here and internationally, writing some very interesting music and keeping within the traditions of Argentinian tango, especially the new tango music, but kind of having his own voice to contribute to that tradition. And Eric here is a very accomplished virtuoso violinist, so it's a wonderful trio that we are able to put together, playing mainly on the program mostly of JP's music, and we hope you enjoy it. actually the title of JP's first album, Tango, with a quintet that he had recorded, which featured multi-Grammy Award winner Paquito de Rivera on that album. So I'm going to also keep you guys on your toes because we're going to actually change the program a little bit here and there. So we'll keep you posted as to what's going on here. The second piece, though, is on the program as listed is After the Rain. And the third piece of this set, instead of Universe, will be Primavera, Spring, which we will celebrate in a couple of days.
Go that way.
Changing the music around, I'm even confused what I'm playing next. Well, we hope you enjoyed those first three pieces, are sort of his staple tunes that have been performed so many different chamber groups. He writes particularly for string players and string orchestra. Pretty much in the style of Astor Piazzolla and the Argentine tango composers of today. And his music kind of, to me, and the reason why I wanted to work with him, his music is kind of has a world music effect to it, and very rhythmic. The energy and the drive is very different than what you would deem as tango music. And tango music has evolved over the centuries, having its heyday at the turn of the 20th century in Europe. In France, it was a big deal in France, and there was this whole underground of tango clubs and bars, and then it became popular in the 20s and 30s through the next composer, Carlos Gardel, who was a well-known singer, songwriter, and composer. You might know one of his famous tunes, Por una Cabeza, which is by a nose, literally means by a nose. It's a horse racing term, I believe, and it was used on the soundtrack of Ascent of a Woman, that famous dance scene at the Rainbow Room. He is considered the king of tango music and writing, and this is one of his other well-known tunes too as well. This is My Dear Buenos Aires. It's for the people. JP, I think, is coming now. It's going to give you a little solo demonstration. You haven't seen this instrument. It's called the bandoneon. It's not an accordion. It's similar to that family. He would be better to explain the whole techniques of playing this. It's a very complicated instrument to play, actually, and the history goes back to immigrants coming from Europe who went to Argentina, and this is actually from the concertina family from Germany, and they brought this to Argentina and Uruguay, brought polka music, waltzes, and that tradition melded with a lot of the music that was already existing at that time, about 150 years ago or so. So I think one great description you might want to say about the voice or the feeling of this bandoneon was a New York Times article that was written about JP. They said that it has the feeling of it's like the poor man's church organ. And it does speak to the common man. Somehow it's soulful and it's expressive instrument, more so I think than the accordion, but I'll let JP talk more about it.
Well, hello everyone. Well, as Alex says, this is called bandoneon. It's very similar to an accordion. But the main difference, I would say, is the keyboard. Every button plays two notes. That's an A opening, and if I close, pressing the same button, change the pitch. Sometimes the interval goes down, goes up, and on my left hand I have the lower register. And of course, if I close as well, it changes the pitch. And the intervals are always different as well. There is actually no logic at all. That's why we have to practice 4 keyboards, 2 keyboards opening and 2 keyboards closing. 4 keyboards into. Well, the piece I'm going to perform now is called Capricho Otoñal, and it's a beautiful composition by Leopoldo Federico. It's not in the program, but it's one of my favorite pieces written for bandoneon by one of the greatest bandoneon composers from Argentina. So this is called Capricho Otoñal. Now we're going to perform a duo I wrote for violin and bandoneon. This is a lullaby called Sweet Dreams, or Dulces Sueños in Spanish. I wrote this piece inspired by my niece in Argentina, who is Julia. Hope you like it. Now, it's actually recorded in a CD that we recorded there. It's called Manifiesto. We ran out of CDs. We only have 5 CDs, so if you want it, we thank you.
Anybody dance the tango? Just curious. Anybody take tango? No, seriously. Yeah, we're all experts with Dancing with the Stars show, huh? Oh, wonderful, yes. That's great. Yeah, and JP is from there. I mean, whereabouts?
I dance a little bit, but only very little.
Where in Argentina? Cordoba? San Juan. He's from San Juan, but he did play. He played at a lot of tango bands in Buenos Aires too, as well. Many years he got his experiences training there. And if you recall, there are all those. I forgot the term, but all those street corners. Yes, Molangas, where they're on the street corners, and people start dancing on the street corners. It's just part of life. It's in the DNA just to do that. So it's a wonderful experience if you haven't. I'm trying to get my wife to do it. In any case, here's another piece that JP wrote. It's called Universe, and then we'll follow that by another piece called Tarangino.
Tarangino is a piece I wrote 3 years ago. Okay, so Tarangino is a piece I wrote 3 years ago, inspired by my grandfather, who was an accordion player. He always wanted to learn this instrument, but he was afraid of the keyboard because, as I explained before, the keyboard is four keyboards in two. So he decided to choose the accordion that doesn't change the pitch. So when he passed away 3-4 years ago, I wrote this piece inspired by him. This is called Tarangino.
Oh. When we get through the last piece, we can ask for an encore. We won't say anything. But we want to thank Penny. Penny and I go back a long ways from some of the groups like Zigzag Quartet, and I've done solo, so I really appreciate it. Thank you for all your support and having a wonderful series, and for all these wonderful supporters here, you patrons, keeping it going. And we have a mailing list. If you want to find out more about JP, has his own quintet with Eric on there. They just released his second group album a couple of summers back. Played at Joe's Pub and has performed it all over the world already. He has them available as well. We have some other CDs as well, some of mine and Eric's, and we have a mailing list there. So come say hello and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear input for his music too as well, I'm sure. And the last tune is called Esqualo, which means, I believe, shark in Spanish, and written by Astor Piazzolla. And Astor Piazzolla was a interesting fellow. He kind of set off a new tango style of writing from what you heard of Carlos Gardel. He actually played as a young boy in Carlos Gardel's band, tango groups, and also interestingly enough, Astor Piazzolla, his family moved from Argentina to New York City in the 1920s, and as a teenager he must have heard jazz, Gershwin, young Duke Ellington, the whole Broadway sound. So he infused a lot of these wonderful elements of jazz, popular, classical into his music. His big sporting hobby was shark fishing. So you can imagine, we played this at one place, and the presenter said he was a big fisherman himself, and he said you can hear the guy tugging with the shark in the music with the way he writes it. So anyways, here we go. This is a squall. we'll do another Piazzolla tune for you called Oblivion. And this tune that he wrote, he played and composed a lot of music for a lot of classical musicians. One famous violinist, Gidon Kramer, was a big proponent in promoting Piazzolla's music, the Cronus String Quartet, and he even worked with jazz greats like Jerry Mulligan, and his music kind of just transcends. So he also wrote for film. This tune, Oblivion, comes from the film Henry IV. It's an Italian production, I believe.
Thank you, Eric and JP and Alex. I'm marking my calendar for next year. And I hope you all will too, and I hope you'll come back.